If you're older or middle Gen Z, meaning you were born somewhere between 1997 and 2012, you might be wondering, what is happening to our golden years? Most media, songs, and TV shows we grew up consuming were all about parties, clubbing, going out, and living while you're young. And yet, I think it's safe to say that that is not what most of our Friday nights look like today. As many of us are in or getting close to entering our 20s, for some reason, life just doesn't seem to be hitting the same anymore. And I would argue that it's not just Gen Z and our growing pains, but rather people from all generations are experiencing this right now. And I can't help but wonder if this has to do with the new epidemic, the loneliness epidemic. Welcome back to Becoming DISScomfortable, a Gen Z podcast where we discuss stepping into your light to become the best version of yourself. I'm your host, Lyla, and this is a pretty complex topic, so grab a snack and get comfy as we unravel all the nuances and the reasons for why so many people are going through this right now, and to also offer you some solutions because there is light at the end of the tunnel. Stats show that over 73% of Gen Zers report feeling lonely either sometimes or always, which happens to be the highest of any generation. The main issue with this is loneliness has debilitating and even deadly consequences. Most of us probably think of loneliness as a bad feeling. Surgeon General Dr. Murthy told USA Today. It turns out, experts say that loneliness is detrimental to our mental and physical health and can lead to increased risk of heart disease, dementia, stroke, and premature death. Research has shown that loneliness is as bad for your health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. At this point, I feel like people are aware of the loneliness epidemic, and you'll hear our parents' generation blaming it on our phones. And that's partially true, but the real causes of this epidemic go a lot deeper than that. So before I get into the more obvious reasons, like our phones, I want to point out some interesting causes to consider based on popular trends concerning Gen Z. Number one, Gen Z's lack of interest in drinking, smoking, drugs, and casual sex. Now, I know that there are Gen Zers out there who are engaging in this stuff, but statistics show that we are doing it a lot less compared to other generations, and as a Gen Zer myself, I totally understand why. You've probably noticed that the public view and perception of smoking and drinking has changed quite a bit over the years, where it was once popular and even glamorized, but now people seem to be more against it. And I definitely think that has to do with the fact that we have been so much more educated on it. One example I can think of from not long ago is when Jenna Ortega was caught smoking, and her mom outed her on social media, which I thought was really funny. She received quite a lot of backlash from her fans, and it just goes to show you that we've really changed the way we think about this. We saw what drugs and drinking and smoking did to so many people before us, and we don't want to partake in that. I also remember receiving a lot of guest presentations in school about the dangers of drunk driving, lots of accidents pointed out near us, seeing flowers tied to the intersections, and then later learning that a kid from our school had died there, for example, in a drunk driving crash, made me so hyper aware of the impact of drinking that I haven't even considered it, even outside of religious reasons. And it kind of drilled this anti-drug, anti-drinking idea in my head from a very young age. So much so that I'm even wary of over-the-counter drugs, antidepressants, painkillers. So I think education is a very, very big factor. You will find that in places where education is less easily available or is lacking quality, drug usage, drinking problems will typically be higher. Okay, so how does this tie into the loneliness epidemic? Well, I don't know about you, but I avoided parties in high school for this exact reason, because usually when people throw parties, at least here in the West or in Europe, it's usually insinuated that there will be drinking and other stuff. Because of the culture we grew up in, drinking and alcohol were served to us in every movie, songs, Hollywood was basically obsessed with it. Now, the reasons I bring this up is because one, it explains the decline of parties and partying culture in general. And number two, bars and clubs make up a huge part of the third spaces available to young people in public today. And we're seeing a decline in Gen Z's interest towards them. If you don't know what what third spaces are, we'll be going over them later. As a city person, I love going to downtown, but every time I do, the vast majority of places I see outside where people typically go to meet other people, like meet new people, make new connections, are bars and clubs. And as an almost 20-year-old, I'm beginning to find it a bit annoying because unless I actively go to university, there aren't a lot of places where I can meet new people my age. Also, going back to the mental health and loneliness concerns, I'm going on a bit of a side tangent here, but I was reading an article on Yes Girl and they pointed out that we might not actually be the generation with the worst mental health and that we are just more open to talking about uncomfortable topics compared to previous generations due to mental health becoming a little bit less stigmatized over the years, although it still is very much stigmatized, which may end up creating an unrealistic illusion. But let's say we are being labeled as the most depressed generation. It has made a lot of us opt for healthier lifestyles and to prioritize our mental health more. Basically, a lot of people are turning to like healthier solutions versus using drugs and alcohol as a coping mechanism as we previously saw generations do. So again, that could be another reason as to why we're not seeing as many people going to places like this. Cause number 2 is definitely financial barriers. So this is a funny TikTok I came across. Boomers selling their homes for $2 million after buying them in 1969 for 7 raspberries. I think this TikTok sums up exactly how we're feeling about this economy right now. It's not it. Most people I know my age are still living with their parents or are somewhat dependent on them. Today, being able to move out and sustain yourself while living a somewhat decent lifestyle is considered a luxury, unfortunately. And it's becoming dystopian to the point where groceries are also being considered luxuries. El Rey on Manifestal, one of my favorite podcasts, did a whole video essay on how the rich are now using groceries as a way to flex and to differentiate themselves from the working class. That and also having like an abundance of free time to be able to cook from scratch. So yeah, people are stressed out, the economy is going to shit, and we are being gaslit by some people in older generations and some wealthy people at the top into thinking that all is well and good when we are literally in the middle of a recession, which, surprise, surprise, is hitting the working class the hardest. Wealth hoarding is nothing new, but you might have heard of the Walmart family getting richer and richer, continually increasing their net worth while simultaneously laying off thousands of their workers. I don't know about you, but here in Toronto, there has been a lot of buzz about how nobody can seem to get a job right now, even though so many places seem to be hiring. I recently found out why that is, and it filled me up with a new level of rage. Apparently, there are a lot of fake ghost listings going up right now. So basically, companies are not actually hiring right now, but they're still posting open job applications to make it look like they're growing and thriving, and also to build up a roster of potential candidates for the future. And even for people with jobs, thanks to inflation, rising living costs, and stagnant wages, people are working more hours, but they seem to be able to afford less than ever before. And honestly, if people are working 9 to 5, and sometimes even on the weekends, overtime, I've heard of so many people being asked to work overtime without even getting paid for that, or if they're doing 12-hour shifts, like, do you honestly think they have the time or energy to go out and meet people? Or college students who are juggling studying along with one or multiple jobs and side hustles, they are exhausted by the end of the week and they don't even get the chance to enjoy the money that they earn. As a result, all of these things have led to burnout, stress, and anxiety. As you can tell, the economic state of the world and our mental health go hand in hand. Hence why many people in my generation feel hopeless right now. I remember feeling it a bit in high school too. Like during my last couple of years, I started going out a lot more with friends, and I could feel the stress sometimes in myself or even my friends when we were spending money on food, on experiences, and just like going out and having fun. Going out with friends today is becoming increasingly expensive, even if you don't drink. So more people are just choosing to stay in and not go out. Number 3 is a lack of third spaces. So I don't want to regurgitate too much because I know a lot of video essays have already talked about this on YouTube, but just in case if you didn't know, third spaces are places that are separate from traditional home and work environments. So examples include cafes, libraries, community centers, places of worship, the gym, You get the point. Now, the issue is for young people in their late teens or 20s who are trying to find a partner or a friend group or just people their age. It's a struggle because we don't have very many third places anymore where people come to meet new people. As I mentioned, downtown is covered with bars and clubs, and even for people who do drink, these are no longer economically feasible options for people in our generation. People can barely afford to pay rent, yet alone dish out money to go clubbing. As for free or less expensive third spaces, there are trends showing a reduction in places such as parks, libraries, coffee shops, and even sidewalks, all of which have been on the decline for years. Another thing to look at are new modern house designs and how they have pretty much eliminated the front porch, where traditionally neighbors, family, and friends would come and sit together and share meals together. I was watching The Princess and the Frog recently, and it's one of my favorite movies. I absolutely love Tiana's story. And there was this really adorable scene where her father was cooking this big pot for all their friends and neighbors, and then he brought it out and everybody ate on the porch. Like, what happened to that? We're all experiencing loneliness because we're no longer part of a community anymore. But forget a front porch, most young people have to live in tiny little crevices, which they're calling apartments today, and have to pay exorbitant amounts of rent for them. So they don't even have the possibility of experiencing those good neighborly connections that previous generations got to enjoy. This all shows you how the loneliness epidemic goes way beyond just our phones and how it is rooted in structural, architectural, and systematic problems. Our world is actively being designed to make us more lonely every day. Now, I'm a little bit too young right now, but in the future, I would love to try hosting some free or inexpensive events in person to try and connect people together, maybe make some new friends. I'm based in Toronto, so we could probably throw an event somewhere near downtown Toronto or the GTA where people could bring like snacks and food, kind of like a potluck. So let me know what you guys think of this idea. Also, I finally made a Discord server for our community, so make sure to check that out. I'll link it for you in the description. It has a book club, it has a couple of other fun wellness type of stuff. You can meet new people, possibly like-minded people, so make sure to go check it out. Cost number 4 is technology. FYI, I'm not just talking about our phones. This one is really a double-edged sword because these new advancements have in some ways made our lives a million times easier, but they're also setting us up for failure when it comes to communication and building and maintaining with other people. So what am I talking about here? Modern advances, like how instead of having to call a restaurant and order or showing up to get it yourself, you can just order using a food delivery app like Skip the Dishes and never really have to communicate with anyone. Or the bonding experiences you could have had by picking up your friends from the airport are now being replaced by Uber and Lyft rides, leaving us feeling more disconnected from our peers. I had to do research on this for a client, and I found out that science says that helping people actually makes us happier. So because of these apps, we now have fewer incentives to help each other out, which means we get less opportunities to truly connect with each other and be there for each other, hence why loneliness rates are skyrocketing. Okay, now let's talk about social media and our phones. Our smartphones have become so heavily integrated into our lives at this point that we sometimes don't even realize how much time we're actually spending on them. Need to look something up, search it up on Google. But then a blog article catches your eye. So you click on it and you read for another 10 minutes. Then you get a notification from Instagram, which causes you to get distracted again, and so on and so forth. I remember when I was younger, going out on weekends was an absolute must, and Fridays as well, and sometimes even the weekdays. But now, I guess people's idea of a good time has changed. Why hang out with a friend when you've got your phone right here in your pocket? It's not exactly your fault. We naturally gravitate towards comfort and laziness. Hanging out with a friend or meeting people means putting yourself out there, driving or taking transit, paying for a meal or something. And I guess when you compare that to using your phone, it just seems like too much effort for our brains now. And another thing I've noticed is even when you go outside, like even when you leave your house, you put the phone down and you go out, other people are on their phones. Like people are on their phones on the train. It's kind of weird all of a sudden to have conversations in public, to make eye contact in public. A lot of people seem to be preoccupied when they're outside. Obviously, this is not everybody. This is definitely more of like a chronically online thing, but I have noticed it. Like going outside, I do see more people on their phones than usual, and I see a lot of people just picking up their phone because they feel awkward in that situation. And I think that that's something we have to do ourselves. Like we have to reprogram our mind to stop doing that and to avoid using our phone to escape like reality and situations like that. Like I promise you, it does work to an extent. Take a look at this video I made. This is your sign to be more present when you go outside. This time when I went on the train, I didn't wear my headphones and I actively made an effort to make eye contact with people and smile and be more welcoming. And guess what? People were 10 times nicer, friendly, more willing to strike a conversation. I had so many lovely conversations, and I'm talking about just one day of doing this. Turn off the music, get off the phone, and listen to the world around you. It's worth it. By the way, I post these shorts on the Discomfortable podcast Instagram, so make sure to follow that so you never miss an update. Number 5 is self-inflicted loneliness. Okay, so this next cause is a bit personal, and yes, in case you've been wondering, I too have experienced this shift recently and like more loneliness than normal. I went through this kind of weird wave of loneliness. I don't know how to explain it. The feeling was just so odd that it stuck with me. Like I haven't forgotten that. And I asked my friends if they were experiencing that too, and like everybody had heard of it. Everybody was experiencing it in their own lives. But you know, maybe it's a college student thing. So from a personal perspective, I have friends that I could call and they would pick up and try to be there for me as best as they can. I have people that I love, people that love me. So then why do we experience this? Why do I get lonely sometimes? Why do I see it in the people that I love? I don't understand that. Like it's like we are lonely, but we're also not. I think it has to do a bit with Gen Z specific issues, and I'm generalizing here, but we really seem to crave deep connections. And due to the lack of intimacy in today's world and fast-paced culture, as well as overthinking literally everything, a part of that, a lot of it has to do with social media, many of us are experiencing difficulty being vulnerable. I was having a conversation with my childhood friends, and one of them asked me why I was so not looking forward to going to university. And I told her it's because I'm tired. You make friends only to then draw apart from them over the next couple of years. Everybody kind of gets busy in their own lives. And all you're left with is memories or occasional meetups where you're basically spending most of the time catching up with each other. And they kind of assured me that that's just how life is. You graduate, you move on to the next phase of your life, and then you have the possibility of making new friends or meeting new people within that next phase of your life. Maybe it's that I crave a lot of depth in my friendships and relationships, but the idea of friendships just like withering away due to like a lot of, again, this systematic issues that I talked about and us getting so busy and wrapped up in all of that, it just doesn't sit right with me. With the world as it is, we don't want to trauma dump on people or make them feel like they're our therapist. But the problem is, as I mentioned before, helping each other out is such a huge part of communication and humanity. Depending on each other is a bonding experience of its own. And so now, due to the transactional nature of our world and given how self-reliant a lot of people are becoming, with people getting their own apartments, this whole culture of people moving out at 18 or even before in the US and North America, we are struggling to be vulnerable and to open up to other people. Sometimes our mind and overthinking amplifies the situation more than it needs to be, which is totally normal. It's self-inflicted. But like the point is that sometimes our mind can make it seem like, I don't know, a lion is chasing after us. We kind of just need to like zoom out for a little while. It's kind of like the spotlight effect, how when you make a mistake, you feel like the whole world saw it, whereas most people probably don't notice, and if they do, they eventually move on and forget. Which kind of ties into number 6, where we're gonna understand loneliness. So before I propose some solution ideas, I recently discovered that loneliness can actually come in many different forms. Dr. Jeremy Noble highlights 3 types of loneliness in his book: psychological, social, and existential. Some people might get psychological loneliness when they don't feel like they have anyone to confide in or trust. Societal loneliness is when somebody feels systematically excluded because of a characteristic such as gender, race, or disability. And existential or spiritual loneliness comes from feeling disconnected from yourself. So in other words, you will never know if somebody is lonely or not just by looking at them, and also like what type of loneliness they're dealing with. And sometimes we conflate loneliness with being alone when the two are not the same thing. I talked about this in a previous episode called The Art of Solitude, which you can check out if you struggle with being comfortable alone. And not just loneliness, another example of this is like depression. We see depression can creep up on people at any time. You will see rich people, poor people, happy people, sad people, all falling into it from time to time. And that is why psychological loneliness is very much real. And I think it's being heightened by the fact that we experience FOMO due to a lot of our social media usage. Do you see like how all of these problems that we have in society are like connected with each other? So it's like when you're staying at home because you don't want to go out and spend money and you're instead scrolling on your phone all day long and now you're addicted to social media, that is causing you to experience FOMO and start comparing yourself to other people, which is then increasing your loneliness, enhancing your psychological loneliness. Your mind is then amplifying how lonely you feel, even though it's not as much as you might think. Psychological loneliness makes me think about how you can be surrounded by roommates, colleagues, classmates, acquaintances, even loved ones, and still feel like you genuinely can't confide in them. And as we are reminded by this quote from Robin Williams, I used to think that the worst thing in life was to end up alone. It's not. The worst thing in life is to end up with people who make you feel alone. Just remember that lonely and alone are not interchangeable. We have been societally programmed into thinking that spending time alone, doing things alone is loser behavior, is bad, and that we always need people in our lives to have fun. And I just don't think that's true. But at the same time, given how many people are experiencing the loneliness epidemic, have talked about it, have admitted to it, I definitely know that it's a bigger, wider problem. Like we talked about, it's based on so many systematic factors that it's a very real and valid issue that is going on right now. I know people with 100,000 followers on social media who admit to feeling lonely sometimes. My point is that it's something we all experience and it's a lot more common than we think. Now let's talk about some solutions and tips that we can try to make the best of. As I mentioned, a lot of this loneliness epidemic is rooted in systematic factors that are beyond our control. So I'm specifically talking about things that you have control over, that you can improve even a little bit in your life. Learning how to not be socially awkward. Social anxiety is not an excuse. Forcing yourself to make eye contact with everyone or most people that you passed on the street. Reach out to people. The only time when you would refrain from doing that is if you are being met with disrespect. Don't be afraid of rejection to strike a conversation. I'll give you an example of this actually. So a couple years ago when I was in school, a guy approached me while I was studying. I was really on the verge of tears in that moment, like literally in the middle of a breakdown, and he couldn't see that because I was wearing a mask at the time. And so I didn't really like end up saying anything to him. Like the point is that you don't always know what people are going through. So if you've ever been met with rejection or disrespect or just like a reaction that maybe you were not anticipating, don't let that make you close up, is my point, because it's 100% that person and how they respond, and it's not on you at all. Now when somebody approached me, we ended up having such a lovely conversation. We matched energy. You never know what's gonna happen and who you meet until you actually put yourself out there. Be open to talking to people, be open to receiving that. I heard somebody say how like most people would be so happy to just have somebody to talk to today, like especially like on the train while you're in transit or something. Like just talking to people is really like, a lot of people just need some people just need a little bit of a push to come out of their shell. My mom did something really sweet recently, which made me think a lot about how I can like step up and do more. She made a little bit of extra dinner and she was like handing out food to our neighbors and kind of like giving them a little like dish to taste test, which I think is like such a sweet and connective gesture. And all it came from was like making that simple little effort to go out of your way to do something for other people. So use these mindset shifts to your advantage. You only get one chance at making a first impression. You may never meet meet these people again? Would you rather be direct with them and show them that you're respectful and kind and a decent human being, or be reserved, given to social anxiety, and not talk to them at all? And mindset shift number 2, you never know who you're gonna meet. So just in case, always try to look your best, feel your best, be authentic, be genuine, be you. Like, I know that sounds corny, but a lot of people will tell you that the reason they don't want to open up is because of all the facades and the masks, and like people don't want to genuinely open up. And I think the first way to get people to get more comfortable to open up themselves is by you being comfortable enough to open up yourself. We are all human. If you think you're the only person struggling with social anxiety or loneliness or depression, you have another one coming. Once your subconscious understands this, you begin to put everybody on the same level and you can be yourself more easily. And another thing, I saw a really cool video essay on this. I'll link it below if I can find it. But we need to bring community back. Like I said, a lot of the reasons for the loneliness epidemic are rooted in structural and architectural reasons with the economy and the lack of third spaces, but there are also online communities connecting people together in real life. Another thing that I'm trying to get back into is taking on more proactive roles within your community. So like volunteering, and I did a little bit of this on my gap year. I'm on a gap year right now, in case you didn't know. I really need to get back into it, and I just know that it's one of the coolest ways to get to know people and also to feel like you're a part of something bigger than you. And another thing is, for if you do have friends but you kind of feel disconnected from them or you haven't seen them in a while, something I've been doing recently is calling them. We get to talk on the phone for hours, even if it's like once a month. And also, like, the next time you get to see these people in person, you won't spend that time catching up with them, but rather you can use that time to make new memories with them. And it also just kind of makes you feel a little bit better. Like you can stop the overthinking a bit. It makes you feel better. And also, if you're looking to make new friends, new connections, this is a boundary that you can establish. I believe 70% of our communication is nonverbal. So texting kind of sucks for communicating properly with each other. So make it a rule. If you meet someone new, tell them you would prefer to meet them in person or call or FaceTime rather than just text all the time. Don't add them on Instagram or Snapchat. Who uses Snapchat anymore? I heard about this girl who launched this like friendship project where she hosts meetups for people in major cities to try to connect them. And I've heard of like lots of these projects popping up. Like, people are taking initiative, so just look for them in your nearest area. And again, you can also join our Discord community. We can connect online, build a community, and then see if we can move that to in-person events. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a comment down below so I know who's watching and so I can interact with you. But if you're a silent viewer, that's also totally okay. If you'd like to connect, I post mini vlogs and motivation on my Instagram. And if you want to see the behind the scenes of my life in Toronto as an incoming college student, I will link my main channel in the description. And I will see you in the next episode.